The Whispering Empire of Antara. A sleep story of tiny lives, gentle hearts, and the rhythm beneath the earth. Beneath an ancient oak tree older than the village nearby and rooted so deep it drinks from forgotten springs, lies the hidden world of Antara. An empire so small you could miss it with a blink, yet so vast and intricate it stretches further than your imagination might first believe. Antara is not a kingdom of war or power. It is a world of harmony, of movement, of memory. This empire, deep below the moss and mushrooms, is carved in quiet beauty. Tunnels like rivers, chambers like pearls, lit softly by glowing spores and polished quartz pebbles that catch and hold the smallest glimmers of light. The air is cool with the scent of damp earth and mushroom roots. If you listen carefully and you are very still, you might hear the low hum of life moving in perfect rhythm. It is morning in Antara, but there is no blaring alarm or sudden noise. Instead, the dawn ants begin their gentle work. These ants, with soft golden hairs on their backs, don't make a sound. They tap the walls with their antennae, each tap a signal to the others that the day has begun. Not to rush, never to rush, but to stretch, to awaken, to begin the rhythm of living once more. In her amber sand chamber, Queen Alula stirs. She is old, very old. Her legs no longer move as fast as they once did. But her mind is sharp, filled with stories. She governs not by command but by wisdom. Her crown is not made of jewels, but of pollen woven with tiny petals carried in from the world above. Each morning she says the same words to the first ants who visit her chamber. Work gently. Speak kindly. Remember who you are. You are Antara. You are home. The words ripple out from chamber to chamber like sunlight through leaves, and each ant carries them in their tiny hearts as they move into the day. The daily rhythm. Life in Antara flows like water through a stream bed, smoothly, purposefully, beautifully. The forager ants are the first to depart. They slip through secret exits near tree roots and dew-kissed leaves. To the outside world they are invisible, just a line of tiny ants. But in truth they are explorers, scouts, whisperers of paths. They find berries fallen in the grass, sugar crystals on picnic blankets, crumbs near garden chairs. But they never take more than they need. They believe in balance, in giving back to the earth. One ant always stays behind to cover the trail with petals or dirt, so predators do not follow. Below ground, the garden ants begin their work. They hum softly, not music exactly but a vibration only fungus understands. Their job is to tend to the great mushroom beds, where glowing fungi grow in spirals and fans, feeding the colony and lighting the paths. They brush the caps gently with leaves, collect spores in little silk pouches, and offer the fungi fresh mulch brought in by the foragers. In another wing of the empire, the bridge builders work in silence. With grains of quartz and bits of clay, they repair the tunnels, strengthening the walls against collapse. Each piece they place is chosen with care. One ant, the architect, draws tiny patterns in the dirt, designs inspired by the shape of tree rings, star maps, or the veins of a dragonfly's wing. In the egg chambers, the nursery ants gently rock the larvae in moss cradles, whispering the names they will carry when they grow. Flicker, clove, pebble, rain. No one is more important than anyone else. There are no titles beyond one, Ant of Antara, and that is more than enough. Midday, the story chamber. When the sun stands high above the old oak, casting shadows across the forest floor, everything in Antara pauses. It is tradition, a moment sacred to the colony. No matter your task, no matter your progress, you stop and gather in the shell chamber. A great, spiraling hall carved in the shape of a nautilus, its walls lined with fossils and shimmering specks of mica. This is where the memory ants speak. The memory ants are storytellers, chosen not for age but for heart. Their bodies are painted in specks of pollen and they wear tiny cloaks made from moth wing dust. They remember everything. The time of flood almost drowned the empire and a chain of ants saved every egg. The night the moonlight filtered perfectly into the central chamber, illuminating everything in a pale silver glow. The day a bumblebee crash-landed in the nursery and was fed honey until it could fly again. But the favorite story of all is about the ant who danced. No one remembers her name, only that she would spin in circles and leap high, even though ants are not meant to dance. At first the colony laughed, but eventually they watched. And then they followed. And so, once a year on the day of spirals, every ant dances. A spiral, a twirl, a slow spin to the sound of thousands of tiny feet. The story always ends with laughter, a few soft claps, and then stillness. Time slows, and the ants return to their tasks with lighter steps. Evening, the soft descent into sleep. As the sky darkens far above and the coolness of night slips into the roots of the tree, the energy in Antara softens. The foragers return, singing in rhythmic waves as they drop off the day's treasures. Flower petals, apple seeds, honey droplets. The gardeners rest. The bridge builders close their journals and tools. The eggs are wrapped in warm moss. Queen Alula lies down in her nest of rose petals, surrounded by the hum of 1,000 dreams. She speaks once more, her words carried on the tiny breeze that passes through the sleeping tunnels. Sleep softly, my kin. Dream of leaves that never fall, of tunnels that hold you gently, of a world that remembers you with every footstep. The ants begin their nighttime ritual. One by one, they send out low vibrations, hums that ripple through the walls, calming the larvae, reassuring their neighbors. These vibrations are lullabies. Each ant family has their own tone, passed from generation to generation like a melody carved in stone. And slowly, ever so slowly, the empire of Antara falls asleep. No doors are locked. No guards are posted. They are safe. Safe in the roots of the earth. Safe in the heart of each other. Above them, the wind rustles the leaves. A moth drifts past the old oak. And the moon watches over all. You too are safe now. Let your breath slow. Let your body settle like sand in still water. Let yourself drift into the tunnels of dream, where the ants of Antara carry stories, not in books or songs, but in the gentle way they live. And so, with the whisper of tiny feet, you sleep. Chapter 2, Pebble's First Path. While the empire of Antara carried on with its ancient rhythm, of tunnels swept clean and fungus gardens lovingly sung to, a young ant named Pebble sat quietly in the nursery chamber, watching the others drift into the flow of their lives. Pebble was not like the others. He was small, not in body but in motion. Where other young ants scurried and hurried with instinctual certainty, Pebble always paused. She listened more than she spoke. She touched the ground with her antennae longer than needed. She stared at the light inside quartz pebbles as if waiting for them to speak. And though no one ever said it aloud, some wondered if she would ever find her rhythm. But today everything would change. A quiet ceremony. It was the day of choosing, when the young ants of the brood received their first role within the empire. There was no crown, no trumpet, no large audience, just soft lantern light from glowing moss, a few petals folded into cushions, and the presence of the path ants, those whose work it was to observe, reflect, and guide. Pebble stood in a semicircle with 5 others her age. She felt her antennae tremble. Her heart beat fast. Each young ant was invited to step forward, and the path ants placed before them a single object, a sign of their path, a shard of bark for a builder, a fleck of sugar crystal for a forager, a thread of silk for a messenger. When it came to Pebble's turn, the path ants did something different. They simply bowed. No object. No path. One of them, an old, thoughtful ant named Elder Clove, stepped forward. She leaned in close, antennae brushing gently against Pebble's. "You are not missing a path," Clove whispered. "You carry it within you, like a song that hasn't yet remembered its melody. Today you will not be assigned. You will wander." "Wander?" Pebble asked softly. Clove smiled. "Yes. Antara listens to her own. You must listen to. Walk the empire. Go where your legs take you. If your heart softens and your thoughts grow still, that is where your path waits. The wander." And so, for the first time in her life, Pebble walked the tunnels of Antara not as a child but as a seeker. She moved through the nursery hall, where tiny larvae rested in their soft cradles of moss and spun silk. The nursery ants whispered lullabies that matched the breath of the earth. Pebble smiled but kept walking. She visited the fungus grove, where the gardeners sang low, pulsing hums to the bioluminescent caps that glowed violet and green in the dim. Pebble felt warmth there but no call. She stepped carefully through the bridge hall, where the builders placed pebbles into walls like pieces of art. She watched the patterns form, spirals, stars, even shapes like wings. One builder invited her to try. She placed a grain of amber-colored sand on the wall, and it fit perfectly. But her chest remained restless. Her feet twitched to keep moving. She passed the shell chamber where the memory ants rehearsed stories for the evening. The tale was of the rain feast, the night when raindrops dripped into Anthra's halls, and the ants danced to the rhythm of water hitting stone. Pebble paused. She almost stayed. But the path still whispered, "Not yet." The sound beneath silence. As the day wore on, Pebble wandered deeper into less-used tunnels. Paths where the walls were a little damper, where the moss hadn't been brushed in some time. Fewer ants passed by now. The sounds were different here. It was quiet, but not empty. There was a pulse, faint but steady. A slow rhythm, deeper than any hum she'd heard. It came not from the walls, but from beneath them. It was like listening to a dream someone had long ago and never stopped dreaming. She followed the sound. The tunnel narrowed. A gentle drip echoed from somewhere ahead. And then, just as her legs began to ache, the tunnel opened into a chamber she had never seen. A hidden hollow beneath the roots of the oak tree. Inside was a spring, a clear pool of water fed by droplets from above. Glowing spores floated like stars across its surface. Ferns curled around the walls. Small stones, worn smooth, ringed the edge of the pool. It was cool here but not cold, still but not lifeless. Sitting near the edge was an ant she didn't recognize. His shell was old, cracked in places, his antennae faded. But he sat so still, so deeply present, that he seemed part of the stone itself. He didn't look at her. He didn't speak. So she sat beside him. For a long time they sat in silence. And in that silence the rhythm became louder, not in volume but in meaning. It was the rhythm of the empire breathing. The listener. Finally the old ant spoke. "You heard it," he said softly. Pebble turned. Heard what? The song under the silence. Few do. Fewer follow it. He turned to look at her, his eyes dim but focused. "I am Elder Drift. I am a listener. One of Anthra's oldest voices. I do not build or carry or hum. I feel. I listen." Pebble tilted her head. "You listen to what?" "To change. To warning. To need. When a tunnel groans beneath weight, I hear it before it cracks. When the queen is uneasy, I sense the tremor in the fungus. When the outside world shifts, the rhythm of Anthra changes." He placed his antennae to the stone. "And you heard it too. That means you're meant to be here." Pebble felt something warm stir in her chest. Not excitement, not pride, but rightness. As though a place inside her, once quiet and unsure, had finally exhaled. Her new path. That evening, while the rest of Anthra gathered in the shell chamber for stories and rest, Pebble remained in the listener's hollow. Elder Drift taught her how to lay her antennae against the walls and feel the song of the colony, how each tunnel, each chamber, each breath of wind above had its tone, and when that tone shifted, something was speaking. Sometimes it was danger. Sometimes it was memory. Sometimes it was just time. Pebble slept curled near the spring, surrounded by the glow of spores and the dripping rhythm of water. And for the first time in her life, she didn't wonder what she was meant to do. She had found it. She was a teller of tremors. She would be one of those who listen when no one else does, and who speaks only when the ground itself has something to say. Above her, the oak tree rustled in the night breeze. A drop of water struck the pool, drip, and sent a ripple across the surface. Elder Drift hummed softly beside her, an ancient song made of stillness. And deep in her moss-lined heart, Pebble smiled. She was home. Chapter 3. The Queen Who Listened Back. Far beneath the oldest oak in the forest, deeper than the roots that drink from springs and whisper to stones, lay the heart chamber of Anthra, a warm, rounded space of glowing amber sand and sweet earth, woven with threads of pollen and lined with flower petals that never wilted. Here lived Queen Alula, the first name on every ant's tongue, though most had never truly seen her. To many she was a figure of stories, to some a voice of wisdom, but only a few knew that she was something else entirely. A listener of listeners, a keeper of dreams, and an ant who carried the weight of generations on her slender, aging back. A heavy crown of silence. Alula did not rule by command. She had no throne, no guards, no fanfare. Her chamber was quiet, her schedule unbroken, her body old, joints slower, shell dulled with time, vision dimmed to shadows and shapes. But her mind was a tapestry of every moment ever lived in Anthra. She could recall the first breath of the tunnels when they were dug by the founding ants, her own ancestors. She could remember when the empire nearly drowned in the flood of the Red Spring, and when ants wove rafts of dandelion fluff to float their queen to safety. She could smell memories in moss, hear secrets in the roots, and feel sorrow in the patterns of footfalls across the main halls. Every night she greeted sleep with a ritual. She would press her antennae gently to the memory stone, a large, smooth rock at the back of her chamber, shaped like a curled leaf. On it were carved faint grooves, trails etched by the legs of every queen before her. And into that stone she would whisper the day. Pebble has found the listening hollow. Drift is awake again. The garden fungus sings stronger today. There is a tremble in the northern tunnel, slight but unfamiliar. I am tired, but I am still listening. The memory stone did not answer, but it held. The ant who visited no one. It was a quiet truth in Antara that the queen rarely left her chamber. It was not because she couldn't. The tunnels were wide enough, the ramps gentle. No, she stayed because she carried presence. When she entered a room, it filled with meaning. Ants paused. Tasks slowed. The rhythm shifted. So she chose to stay where her energy could ripple outward, not disrupt. But one morning, soft and blue with sleep still clinging to the walls, Queen Alula did something unexpected. She left. No one announced it. No fanfare was raised. But the ground seemed to know. The walls vibrated with a slightly higher pitch. A tremor of curiosity spread across the colony. The queen was walking. And she walked alone. Walking the past. Her legs were slow but practiced. Every few steps she paused, not from fatigue but to remember. She passed the old spiral chamber where her own choosing day had once been held. Back then she was called Thimble, not Queen. A quiet ant with a deep hum and a fondness for stones. She remembered how the path ants had whispered. This one listens with her whole body. This one will not speak until the ground speaks first. She passed the builder's hall where she had once carved her first line into the walls, a pattern inspired by a falling leaf. The wall still stood. Her line still there, faint but present. She passed the old nursery, long since moved, and saw in her mind a sea of moss cradles. She had once helped save them from a fungal rot by bringing in lavender petals to soothe the air. That was the day the gardeners began using floral infusions. She smiled, but her legs kept walking. Into the hollow. Eventually, she came to a tunnel with a scent she hadn't felt in years. Spring water and quiet stone. She followed it. The air cooled. And then she entered the listening hollow. There, curled beside the glowing pool, was a young ant. Her small body rose and fell in sleep. Her antennae twitched in slow rhythm. Pebble. Drift sat nearby, his old eyes half closed, though he noticed the queen the moment she entered. He said nothing, just nodded once, slowly, as if saying, "You're not here for me. You're here to remember something you forgot." And so the queen sat, listening back. Alula rested her body beside the pool, careful not to wake Pebble. She placed her antennae on the ground. The rhythm was old. Older than her. Older than drift. Older than names. It was the heartbeat of Antara. And she listened not as a queen but as a student. She remembered a time when she, too, had wandered. When her mentor had brought her here to teach her that a leader does not command. A leader feels, not just joy and peace but warning. The subtle shift in how the water drips. The pause in the mushroom song. The sudden absence of ants near a certain stone. Listening is a form of devotion. And it had been too long. Tears welled at the corners of her eyes. Not from sorrow. From relief. Even after all these years, Antara still held her. Still spoke to her. Still trusted her to listen. Third turn. When Pebble stirred, she saw Alula already rising to her feet. Pebble scrambled up, instinctively bowing. "Your Majesty." But Alula held up a gentle leg. "No need." They stood in silence together. Then the queen spoke softly. "You have found what most ants take a lifetime to hear." Pebble said nothing, overwhelmed. Alula smiled. "Drift has taught you well. You will teach Antara. And one day Antara will teach someone through you. That is the way." They walked together back through the tunnels, neither rushing, neither speaking much. But every ant who saw them passing felt something shift, not in fear but in meaning. The queen had walked. The queen had returned. And the queen was not alone. That night, back in her heart chamber, Alula pressed her antennae to the memory stone once more. "I walked today. I remembered what it means to feel the soil speak. Pebble has become more than she knows. Drift is nearly ready to pass the hollow to her. The tunnels are whole. The fungus is singing. The Empire is humming. I am tired, but I am no longer weary. She paused, then whispered, "Thank you." And the memory stone, though silent, seemed to glow just a little brighter. As Alula curled into her bed of petals, the hum of the colony wrapped around her like a blanket. The scent of lavender and moss filled the air. Spores floated gently through the ceiling vents. Above, the wind moved through the branches of the old oak, but below, in Antara, everything was at peace. And the queen, the one who had listened longer than anyone, finally closed her eyes. Chapter 4. The First Tremor. The air inside Antara was always cool and damp, like a morning that never ends. The tunnels breathed, fully, consistently. 1,000 legs moved across polished sand, and the colony's rhythm pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the roots of the world. Nothing rushed here. Nothing crashed or barked or shattered. This was a world of gentle rhythms, known paths, and ancient memory. But this morning, Pebble felt something wrong. Not loud, not sharp, just a tremor, small, uncertain, out of place. And it was hers alone to notice. The rhythm shifts. She had just awoken in the listening hollow, the glow of the spring light painting her shell in flickers of gold and blue. Elder Drift had left early, mumbling something about a ceremony in the garden wing. Pebble stretched, drank a drop of fresh water, and pressed her antennae to the smooth stone floor. Her first thought was, everything is as it should be. The moss hummed gently from the nursery. The distant foragers returned in a lazy rhythm. The spore winds whistled faintly through the upper vents. But then, a beat too long. A pause where there should be a gentle return. A space in the symphony, not silence, but a waiting that felt worried. She placed her antennae down again. Slower now. Deeper. And this time she felt it. A tremor. Subtle. Faint. Like a footstep from something not of Antara. A hollow pressure behind the usual rhythm. Pause. Thump. Pause. And then, nothing. Seeking drift. Pebble left the hollow at once. She moved carefully, not to disturb the walls or confuse the other ants. Every ant in Antara moved with grace, but Pebble moved with intention. Her legs, still small, moved faster than usual. A few gardeners looked up as she passed. Some smiled, others nodded politely, but she didn't stop to chat. She reached the garden wing where Elder Drift was inspecting new lichen growth. The pink spores spiraled gently in the air, and a chorus of ants hummed softly as they groomed the caps of the giant mushroom known as mother fern. "Drift," she whispered. He didn't turn. "Drift," she said again more firmly. Now he turned. She saw the instant flicker of recognition in his eyes. He looked at her as if he'd just remembered a name from a dream. "You felt it," he said before she could speak. She nodded. "Where?" Pebble placed a leg against the floor and traced the direction. "Near the northwind roots. Somewhere beyond the nursery wall." Drift tilted his head. "The old vents." He went silent. A deep, long silence. The queen's memory. The northwind roots were a forgotten stretch, once part of the active tunnel system, but sealed decades ago when winter storms caused collapses near the forest surface. It was believed to be too unstable to maintain, so the builders closed the passage and memory moved on. But Antara never forgets fully. Pebble had never been there. Drift had. He'd spoken of it once, briefly, of wind moving through roots like a flute, of stories sung in a different tone than the rest of the empire. Queen Alula had once called that region the Whispering Edge. If it was stirring again, something had changed. Secret journey. Drift didn't call a council. He didn't notify the path ants. Instead, he whispered, "We go now." And together, elder and apprentice, they descended through a narrow slope leading to the outer tunnels, a place even the fungus lights hesitated to grow. The sand was colder here, the stone tighter. Pebble's breath moved slower as if the air itself were holding back. Eventually, they reached a wall, old, thick, marked with the seal of the Second Queen's era. Drift placed his leg to the stone. "Do you feel it again?" he asked. Pebble nodded. There was the tremor. Louder now. Not dangerous yet, but wrong. A drumming, uneven. Not footsteps. Not water. Not roots. Something thinking, breaching the past. They broke the seal. With quiet effort, Drift chipped away at the stone until the seal cracked and the air changed instantly. A wave of old scent hit them. Dust, ash, thyme. They stepped into a tunnel unlike any Pebble had seen. The walls here were etched with old symbols, spirals, moons, and star shapes. The ceiling had collapsed in places, revealing frozen vines now fossilized in crystal. Pebble stepped carefully, feeling with each motion. The tremor grew stronger. Then the chamber widened, and what they saw silenced them. The forgotten machine. In the center of the chamber, half buried in stone, lay a machine. It was not of ant make. It was round, metallic, covered in strange lines and symbols that shimmered faintly. At its core it pulsed. Thumb, thumb, thumb. The very rhythm Pebble had heard. It was not alive. But it was not asleep either. Drift approached it with reverence, as if afraid to wake a sleeping god. This, he said slowly, was left by the above walkers. Before the oak tree. Before Antara. Pebble was trembling now. Why is it awake? Drift placed a stone gently beside it. But something has shifted. Maybe the seasons above have changed. Maybe the forest breathes in new ways. Or maybe... He turned to her. Maybe it's time for Antara to remember something it chose to forget. A message in the pulse. The machine pulsed again and Pebble stepped forward. She pressed her antennae to the stone floor beside it. And this time she didn't just feel rhythm. She felt words. Not spoken, not seen, but felt like memory without a name. We watched you. You built beauty in our forgetting. The soil remembers us. We never meant to leave it all behind. You are the dream we never finished. He pulled back, stunned. Drift stared at her. What did it say? She whispered, it knows us, sees us, and it's lonely. The first council. Drift did something then he had not done in 20 years. He called for the listening bell. A deep, vibrating stone only rung when something beyond the colony's understanding was stirring. The entire empire slowed. All movement paused. Even Queen Alula opened her eyes. The ants of Antara gathered. Gardeners, builders, foragers, messengers, memory ants, and more. Some had never seen each other before, all so spread out in their tasks. But now they stood in a vast ring around the shell chamber, Pebble and Drift at the center. Queen Alula arrived last, carried not in grandeur but in silence. She looked at Pebble. You felt it. Pebble nodded. He told them everything. About the tremor, the old tunnels, chamber, the machine. And when she finished, the queen simply said, then the dream has changed. We must now listen further. The empire holds its breath. That night there were no stories, no nursery songs, no bridge building. Antara simply listened. To the soil, to the stone, to the roots, and to the whisper, not of danger but of invitation. The machine pulsed gently beneath the oak. Not threatening, not demanding, but hoping. And deep within her chamber, Pebble curled in moss, the weight of her first true message inside her. He did not fear it, because she now knew. Listening is not just about silence. It is about courage. To feel what others cannot. To speak it. And to guide the empire through what lies ahead. Chapter 5, Dreams from the Machine. The pulse continued. Beneath the whispering edge, in the sealed-off chamber that hadn't felt breath or footfall in generations, the forgotten machine stirred softly, not with movement but with memory. Not its own memory. Not quite. It was carrying something. Something vast. Something lonely. Something that now sought to speak, not through voice but through dream. Pebble's night. Pebble had not spoken since the council. Not out of fear but because everything inside her was changing. She lay curled in the listening hollow, her legs tucked beneath her, her antennae folded gently forward. The moss hummed softly. The spring dripped. But her thoughts did not belong to this chamber anymore. They belonged to the chamber beneath. To the pulsing thing that remembered a time before ants, before tunnels, before the silence. She had not meant to dream. But she did. In her dream, Pebble was walking above. Not in tunnels but in open air. She was impossibly large, standing on only 2 legs. The sun was blinding. The trees towered and whispered in strange tongues. She wore a coat made of wind. And she looked down at the ground, at an anthill small and patient. She heard a voice inside her, deep, slow, filled with ache. We built too fast. We spoke too loud. We forgot to feel. But you remembered. Pebble looked into the soil and the anthill opened like a mouth. And from it poured light. She woke gasping, though her breath was calm. Her chest felt full. Not heavy, just full. Like a story trying to be born. She stood at once and made her way to the Queen Alula's chamber. Queen Alula had not slept. Instead, she lay curled in her chamber, her antennae pressed to the memory stone. When Pebble arrived, the Queen spoke before she could say anything. "You saw it." Pebble nodded. "So did I," said Alula. "And so did others. The fungus gardeners. The old forager Stonefoot. Even Drift. The machine is no longer just awake. It's reaching." Pebble lowered her head. "Why us?" Alula's gaze softened. "Because we remember what others forgot. Because we never stopped listening." Then the Queen did something unexpected. She rose, slowly, shakily, and motioned for Pebble to follow. "Kulme. We must return to it." They returned to the edge. They walked in silence. Drift met them in the tunnel, his eyes unreadable. Wordlessly, they entered the Whispering Edge, and once again the pulsing glow of the machine welcomed them. This time it was brighter. The symbols on its side shimmered like dew on spider silk. Alula approached, her legs trembling. She placed her antennae near the base of the machine and closed her eyes. Then, slowly, she began to hum. It was not a song Pebble had ever heard. It was low, ancient, cracked with age. But as the hum filled the chamber, the machine responded. Not with movement, but with projection. A faint ripple of light spilled from its center and formed something like a memory in air. A flickering image of vast green fields, machines plowing through them, sky rivers filled with silent birds, and then, a sudden emptying. Cities abandoned. Lights off. Roots reclaiming stone. The ants stood in silence. The vision faded. The gathering of rolls. That evening, the entire empire of Antara changed. Without being asked, ants began remembering their origins. Gardeners returned to the wildest mushrooms, seeking spore patterns they had never studied. Builders began repairing the ancient tunnels leading toward the machine. Memory ants gathered in the shell chamber and recited stories not heard in decades, sometimes weeping mid-sentence. Pebble, she wandered. She felt something shifting not just in the tunnels, but in her own identity. She was no longer just a listener. She was a bridge. Between past and now. Between silence and memory. Between what was forgotten and what still remembered her. The memory of the above walkers. Over the next few days, more ants began to dream. Sometimes it was images. Trees made of metal, stars that moved, hands shaping soil. Sometimes it was emotion. Loss, longing, shame, hope. Sometimes it was a simple word. Forgive. The Queen called a new council. But this time she said little. Instead, she stood beside Pebble and whispered, "We must choose not what to believe, but how to respond." She looked to Pebble. "And that begins with you." The message. Pebble returned to the machine that night. Alone. She carried no tools, no torch. Just a petal folded around a single drop of nectar. An offering. She placed it beside the core of the machine. She pressed her antennae to the ground. And she whispered, "We are here. We do not forget. If you left something behind, we are willing to carry it. But only if it grows. Only if it listens. Only if it becomes us, not what you were." The machine pulsed once, softly, gently, and the glow inside it slowed. It was listening back. The Empire dreams together. That night, every ant in Antara dreamed the same dream. They stood in a field of moss and starlight, under a sky that was not sky but memory. The old machines stood in rows, not ominous, not towering, simply still, watching. And Queen Alula stood at the center, her voice echoing like a stream. "We are the soil. We are the seed. We are the silence that sings. We remember. We listen. We forgive. We become." The dream lingered long after waking. And when the colony awoke, something in Antara had changed. Not broken, not frightened. Just opened. The old rhythms remained. The fungus still hummed. The foragers still marched. The gardeners still sang. But now, beneath it all, a new rhythm had joined them. A rhythm of memory. Of voice. Of choice. And in the hollow, Pebble slept. No longer just an ant. But an echo. A bridge. A whisper made flesh. And Antara listened. Chapter 6. The First Light. The chamber was silent. The machine, once a forgotten whisper beneath the soil, now glowed with steady calm. Its pulse no longer trembled with longing. It breathed now in rhythm with the colony. Pebble stood beside it, not as a scout, not as a messenger, not even as a listener, but as a speaker. Dozens of ants surrounded her. Builders, gardeners, memory ants, the curious younglings from the nursery, even the old and nearly forgotten ones who hadn't moved beyond their chambers in years. Elder Drift rested near the back, his eyes bright with quiet pride. And Queen Alula stood still and tall beside the wall, her antennae slightly bowed. In the center, the machine opened, not a hatch, not a door, but a petal-like unfolding. Inside glimmered a small seed. Not made of stone, not metal, something else entirely. Pulsed, not alone but with the ants. Pebble stepped forward and gently lifted it between her forelegs. It was warm. Not hot. Not heavy. But filled with something ancient. He turned to the others. "It's not a command," she said softly. "It's a gift. A memory still alive. But it needs to be planted." Alula nodded once. "Then we plant it." The planting. Together they returned to the highest chamber of the colony, the old sunroot hall, where tiny beams of sunlight slipped through the roots of the oak. No ant had used this place in years. Pebble placed the seed in a patch of moss, and the others gathered around. The gardeners hummed their most ancient tune. The builders carved a spiral around the seed. The memory ants whispered names, not just of ants but of all things ever lost. And the moment the seed touched the soil, a single sprout emerged, pale silver-veined, glowing softly, alive. Not fungus, not plant, something new. The final whisper. As the ants watched in stillness, the sprout vibrated softly, a voice not of words but of meaning. You listened, you remembered, you forgave. Now grow. The light dimmed, but the rhythm remained. Not a machine's hum, not an ant's song, but something shared. That night, the entire colony fell asleep with open hearts. Pebble curled into her moss nest, not alone, not uncertain. She had listened to silence. She had carried memory. She had planted something that remembered more than one kind of life. And deep below the oak tree, Antara dreamed again. Not of the past, not of loss, but of what could be. Together,